Welcome everyone for another episode of Safe Passages. I'm your host, Tara Jabari, and this time I have Elias from Go Unpacked Substack. Welcome, Elias.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we kind of connected as Substackers do, kind of communicating through the notes and the chats and stuff like that. And you guys, you and your family moved from San Francisco to Mexico, and you have two young children. And you also traveled quite a lot before you had kids with 40 plus countries. Me too. So, um, and before we get in, I have a controversial opinion.
Please.
And I wrote a blog post about it, that a lot of like cousins who've had children and stuff, I don't have kids yet. But they're like, it's so hard to have like travel with kids. You have no idea how hard it is. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not impossible. And then they'll go to like a resort, like a, all inclusive resort, like Tulum or something. And I'm like, oh, it's not impossible. You just don't want to go and explore in like the Czech Republic or something like that. It's an excuse. You're using your kids as an excuse. So don't give me that BS kind of thing.
You're not going to hear that from me. I promise you
Exactly.
that
So
much.
I was like, when I saw that your Substack is mostly about how you guys decided to move, and we'll get into why and all of those things. And I was like, oh, you know what? Basically, don't listen to me because you can be like, well, she doesn't know what she's talking about. She doesn't have kids. You have two kids under the age of 6, right?
Yes, 6 and 3.
6 and 3. Like, okay. So that's my 2 cents on it. What has been your perspective about traveling? And you did travel abroad, like in multiple countries before you guys decided to settle in Mexico.
Travel for us is only as difficult as the journey to reach your destination. Okay, so the airplanes and the long car rides and the train travel, although some of that can be fun and rewarding in its own way. For us, our key ingredient has been staying for an extended period of time everywhere we've gone with children. Pre-kids, we moved at, this accelerated pace, backpacking first, solo before even meeting Chanel in my early 20s, and then doing a lot of backpacking together for the better part of a decade. Pace and kind of the in-between periods of travel were not a concern because we only had ourselves to look after. When we had kids, we knew that we wanted to travel at length and even live abroad if the opportunity presented itself. And we also knew that we wanted to do so in a completely different way than we had done previously. And that meant longer stays, one to 3 months in every location at a minimum. Now we've kind of settled in Mexico for an even longer period, and we can talk about that. My kind of philosophy is that traveling with children is just like strengthening any other muscle, going to the gym or, for a young child, becoming a confident reader or developing their skill set in art or whatever else. And our children do best when they are moving in the world. They actually argue and butt heads and get into it with one another when they've been at home for too long. But they're at their best when we are in movement, in transit, outdoors, exploring. So they've kind of become professional travelers in a sense. And I think, you touched on it in your introduction. I think that parents, adults, often do use their children as an excuse, for lack of a better word.
I knew it.
Yep.
I knew it.
Yep. So I think you're onto something there, Tara. And I think that comes from, especially in the Western world, the comfort level we've developed with our lifestyle, right? There is so much certainty, there is so much predictability that when an opportunity arises to do something completely different, that makes one afraid, that raises questions, that involves going into very unknown places, internally and externally, right? That's when we hesitate. That's when we start to question whether those decisions are wise. And often, right, we ask questions about, the potential well-being of our children. Are they going to adapt? Are they going to make friends? Is moving frequently going to be harmful in some way? And the quick and short answer is no to all of that. Children are highly adaptable. We put ours into a full immersion Spanish speaking school when they didn't know a word of Spanish, and they've done great. So don't use children as the excuse. If there are other reasons why perhaps a family should question the decision to make a bold life change, such as maybe the temperament of the child. There are certain situations where it could be difficult, or if there are health-related concerns, of course, those need to be factored in. But assuming the health of your child and a fairly flexible, adaptable temperament, that's all you need from that standpoint.
I'm curious, when you said like when you had kids, that's when you would do slow travel. Before you did fast travel, um, I've been doing more or less, I tend to do slow travel now. I try and stay 3, 4 weeks, sometimes longer in one place or in one country. Do you have, do you know why you tended to do fast travel when you were younger?
Part of it was the backpacker archetype, right? At that point in our lives, we were traveling often on vacation time. So
Mm.
there was this kind of urge to use every last minute, and we would, book flights, departing the evening after getting off of work, stay for 2, 3, 4 weeks, as long as our work schedules would allow, and then fly back, at midnight, the night before returning to work, or even take a sick day at the beginning or the end, if that's not suspicious at all. There was this urge early in our life, because we hadn't seen as much as we have now, to move quickly, to stay 2, 3, 4 days. A week felt like an extended stay, and certain places really required more from us. We spent some time in India and stayed in several places for a couple weeks at a time. But in general, our inclination was to move quickly and to meet people and to travel with people and to kind of build these itineraries that were also quite flexible, and that often we were not necessarily booking our lodging in advance. We had a general sense of where we wanted to go, but that often changed. If we met someone who had a great idea about where to go, we might just change our plans and travel with them, or travel in a small group, or uh, you know, change
Yeah.
our plans altogether, right? Because we didn't have any responsibilities beyond ourselves, and doing so was easy. Now, having traveled with children, I would not go back to the way I did it in my 20s, but I endorse those who travel like that, because it has its own rewards and its own benefits. But having seen the benefits of really immersing in a place and moving to a place and developing routines and rhythms, it is so rewarding to travel in that way, assuming you have the ability to do so, and the time constraints aren't there. Um, we certainly won't go back to the old
The
days.
past. That's a good point because you said we would only really travel when you had vacation time. And I was like, oh, yeah, duh. Not everyone has a remote job, Tara, dummy. So there's like that. I forgot about that. Um, so to your point, yeah. So for people who do take like, I have a 2 week vacation coming up, I'm going to go backpack through Europe. Because also you're coming from the west coast of the United States. We're a huge country, and it's like a 12-hour flight to get to Europe. So it makes sense. You want to see as much as you can in that 2 weeks.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do not pass judgment on anyone for the way in which they choose to travel and the pace at which they choose to travel.
That's
I would encourage staying long enough to at least have a couple of places that start to feel a little bit more familiar, whether it's a coffee shop or a
true.
restaurant or a marketplace, right? Even after returning to a place a second time or a third time or a fourth time, just over the span of a week or even several days, there becomes a level of familiarity that changes the experience of a place. And I wrote about it in one of my early Substack articles about our transition to Mexico, right?
Hmm.
Our family moved here about 16 months ago to San Miguel in the central highlands of Mexico. And that initial transition was really difficult. And we questioned whether this was the right place for us, right? All of those kind of instinctual questions and fears and doubts rose to the surface for us very quickly within days, right? And we started passing judgments about this place. And we saw it in a certain way that now, after having lived here for all this time, it almost feels like a completely alternate reality, right? When I walk down the same street today that I walked down the first day we moved here, I see it completely differently. So the lesson in that for us was that our first impressions of a place are often wrong, or they're at least skewed in some way.
Hmm.
So when you arrive somewhere and you think, this really isn't for me, I feel like I've seen everything in a day or two, right? There's always a beneath the surface opportunity, and we've experienced this over and over and over again in this incredible way where we'll show up somewhere and the place itself will be different from the image of it we constructed in our heads beforehand. The first thought is disappointment because we've created this picture which is one of great reward. Whether it's the small town we went to in Portugal for 3 months, Algesur, we imagined that there would be cafes tucked into the whitewashed homes that are angled into this beautiful hillside a couple of miles from the sea, and there were no cafes. The shops along the main street had cars whizzing past them. So our initial disappointment, due to some of the cosmetic features of this town, faded within a week or two because we started to understand and experience the charm of this place. And we came to love it so much that we considered moving there at the end, which was also another fantasy that we can talk about perhaps. So I just encourage people not to pass initial judgments, even if the place is not for them, right? One might determine that one likes or prefers a certain city or town or location over another. That's totally fair. But giving it some time allows opportunity for deepening of one's perceptions.
That's true. I remember I read that post that you did because when you guys first moved, you were like, we need a place close to the kids' school, and we don't want it, and it to be stroller friendly, so no cobblestones. And I was thinking, like, Mexico, no cobblestones. I don't think that's realistic. And then you read on, and you're like, yeah, that was not realistic. So, so you have these. Also, I think we have a sense, particularly for, I think Americans, say what you will about us, but we do have a sense of like, we know how to make things work efficiently, like air conditioning, um, like having a dryer as well as a washer, those kinds of things. And a lot of places don't. And you're like, oh, right, yeah, I have to think of laundry twice or three times as long because they won't have a dryer. I have to air dry it. Those kinds of things. So you just have to kind of adjust and forget about the comforts because it's not necessarily a necessity as it is where you grew up. So I liked that kind of, and to your point, you're like, your first impression could also be that idea of like, how could you not have, why is everything cobblestone? Like, how am I supposed to do this? Well, I'm sure everyone locally still uses strollers. They don't carry their children everywhere. So if they can do it, you can too.
Exactly. And we've certainly figured out a way. To your point about the comforts of our previous life,
Mm,
because I am not working full time
mm,
in our current existence, there are opportunities for living more slowly, right? So the conveniences that were required in order not to pull our hair out and go completely mad are no longer required in the same way. And because now we live on very part-time work that my wife does as a psychotherapist seeing clients in California, we do have budgetary constraints and we take it upon ourselves to accept the challenge of cutting in certain areas. And for example, in Portugal, we were living in a very, very small space
mm,
and there was not a washer and dryer. So for this period of time, I took it upon myself to wash all of our family's clothes in a bucket, right?
mm.
Old fashioned. And the ritual of it, while tedious and at times frustrating, became part of our life, right? I would wash the laundry in the sink and then I would hang it out to dry on the sunny front porch. In another location, because we couldn't find a two-bedroom place within our
Mm.
budget, and we've done this several times, we look for a one-bedroom unit that has a fold-out couch. So for another month, I slept on the fold-out couch. My wife and our boys slept in the one bed, right? So there are areas that for us are flexible.
Hmm.
There are other areas that are not flexible. We need a kitchen. We need a place that's clean. We will not stay in a place, in an apartment or a house, if it's dirty, if it's filthy. That's
Yeah.
a non-starter for us. We have budgetary constraints. We need to be near a grocery store because we cook almost all of our meals. We need to be in a place that is walkable to some extent because we don't have a car. And we kind of figured out what those non-negotiables were through a very simple exercise that I outline in one of my Substack posts, where we just drew two circles, and in the inside circle we put our non-negotiables, and that in the outside circles went everything else, all of the things that were not part of our core needs. And in that outer circle was laundry, right?
Yeah.
In that outer circle was number of bedrooms, size of the place, right?
Hmm.
Those are not important to us. Somebody else might say, "Oh, I do need to be sleeping in an actual bed. I do not want to wash my laundry by hand." And that's absolutely fair. As long as you determine what those negotiables and non-negotiables are, you will be set up for success in your relationship with your partner,
That's so
right?
true.
And in your trip. And that's an exercise that comes from John Gottman, a psychologist who uses it with couples to help them figure out um, areas in their relationship where there's flexibility and where there's not.
I loved that one. That was one of the first things that I read, and I have a friend who's a nomad, and she never knows what she's going to do next. She's been in Morocco for like 6 months and she's like, I don't know where I'm going next. And she's so indecisive. And I sent her that. I'm like, this is perfect for you. Just pick a place. Lord help us if we could ever travel out in outer space too, because that just widens your options. So, um, but I wanted to also touch on there are a couple of people's concerns of like, especially with small children. A is community. When you travel so much, how do you find a community? Like, let's say you want to go on date night. How do you find a babysitter that you can trust? Or I've met some expats, particularly one I spoke to. She moved to Norway, and she said, sure, they have a great maternity and paternity leave, but if you work full time, which I don't, so I don't get a lot of support when I'm trying to figure some things out. And in Norway, it's not that they're rude or anything, they just very, very private and they feel like it's no one's business. So it's hard to get, those kinds of things like a mommy group together because that's just not a thing. She's American. So Americans are kind of used to be like, let's get coffee. And isn't it hard when the kids have a tantrum and that's not something the Norwegians kind of do. So she's kind of struggling, she's finding her way. And I think that's another big concern for people in that way, for the parents and for their kids. How do you find that community?
We have spent an incredible amount of time with our children over the past few years. That's not for everybody. One of my good friends, before we left home in fall 2023, he looked at me and he said, Elias, what you're doing is my worst nightmare. And I said, you know what? That's fair. That's fair. Some people are perfectly happy going to work, spending, 8, 9, 10 hours away from their children every day, coming home, having dinner and running through the bedtime steps and then having time for themselves in the evening. For us, we decided that during this finite period of time when our children were young, we wanted to be together as a family. And that comes with challenges, right? After week after week after week of being together full time, and this was before my children started school. For 1 year before moving to Mexico, we traveled with them and they were not enrolled in a school program, with the exception of a 2-month period in Portugal when my oldest son, who was 4.5, almost 5 at the time, enrolled in a wilderness school in Portugal. Outside of that 2-month period, we spent 24/7 together as a family. Now, we didn't struggle to find community, although the longer you stay in a place, the more opportunity there is to develop relationships and connections. And we have found that being in Mexico in one location for now over a year, we've given ourselves time to kind of develop meaningful relationships with like-minded families. And to me, that was the biggest surprise socially moving abroad, was the ease with which we met people who essentially have the same philosophy as us, right, about life. Everyone we meet here moved for a similar reason, right? Although everybody has their own unique circumstances and the ways in which they operate their lives and earn money and send their children to school. Everyone has a unique circumstance. But kind of the core underlying values that bring a bunch of expat families to a particular town in Mexico are very similar and aligned, right? Whereas in the United States, we didn't know anybody who was attempting to do what we wanted to do, especially in that period, in that runway period where we were kind of planning to do this. And it felt isolating at times, right? It was a little lonely. We didn't have this community of people to follow who had done something similar, who we could lean on for advice, who would even encourage us, right? And coming here, we found the complete opposite. And that's been, a wonderful surprise for me in that
That is interesting.
everybody here is living a life that for them is completely normal, right?
Hmm.
Nobody says, wow, you are the most adventurous family we've ever met, which we get in the United States all the time. And we don't see ourselves that way, right?
Yeah.
But when you come here, you just pick up a conversation in a very everyday sense, and there isn't this great sense of uniqueness or bravery or the fact that your family's doing anything other than what it should. So to answer your question, we haven't had a babysitter necessarily, uh, but that's not because babysitters aren't available here. Lots of families
Right.
have a babysitter. Now our children are in school for it's a relatively short school day. I wish it were a little bit longer,
Well, it will
right?
be.
But we do still have 5 or 6 hours Monday through Friday when they're in school, and now we have time to ourselves. So I think that if you're willing to enroll your children in a school, that provides the kind of solution to some of what you're presenting. Now, for families who are world schooling or out schooling or whatever schooling, all of these labels are now assigned to different types of unschooling. That's a different question. But for us, it was important for them to be in a formal school. And in large part, we moved to this particular location because there's a school here that we felt good about.
Um, well, I don't want to take up more of your time. I just had, but since part of Safe Passages does talk about the tech world, we had briefly discussed off camera, uh, for corresponding that you guys are not really tech sav. You don't really use technology with your kids, and I think I've had a couple of episodes with past guests that say like we don't really encourage it with technology with children and things. It has become worst case scenario the new babysitter and things. And with your wife's background as a psychotherapist, have you noticed anything in changes with other children that your kids play with, or any tips, particularly when you travel, if the kids are starting to get cranky or anything like that? Do you guys are like, here's the phone, here's just watch, whatever Bluey or whatever it is, or play a game, or is your instinct to do something else before you force a tech screen time?
Our instinct is to do something else.
Hmm.
And we largely do not allow or provide tech opportunities for our children. They're still very young, they're 6 and 3. That philosophy also aligns with the ed approach of the school that we send them to. It's a Waldorf school. And the Waldorf philosophy speaks a lot about the cognitive and emotional development of young children being tied directly to kind of free form imaginative play. And that involves, engaging with the world around you. That involves interpersonal, you know, opportunities. That involves being immersed in nature, right? And having a mediated experience, right? Presenting an experience of the world through a screen is counterproductive to that. And we believe that we hold that to be true. Now that doesn't mean that we have a completely no screens approach in our house. Our kids see our phones out and they look at photos on our phones sometimes. They will watch a show once a week while we're in Spanish class, an hour of Blippy, but it's in Spanish,
Mm.
right? So we see that as an opportunity for them to have exposure to the language. And on airplanes, if there's a screen in front of the seat, we'll
Yeah.
kind of carefully browse through the menu of movies and try to choose something that's appropriate. Our 3-year-old, it just so happens that his first reaction to almost everything that is kind of a narrative type film or TV program is fear, right?
Oh,
He's not he is kind of resistant to watching, narrative programming, and often finds movies. We have attempted, we thought, wow, let's have a movie night. Let's make popcorn and sit down as a family, and we don't have to plan or do anything else. We can just have a movie night. But it didn't work because the little guy wasn't having it, and he was afraid of, whatever, harmless show we had picked out. So for us, keeping them off screens certainly provides more opportunities for them to get into it with one another, right? For them not to be sedated, to just sit there with their mouth open and watch a show without interruption. So it requires more work from a parenting perspective. It's certainly not the easy approach, but for us, we feel strongly that the mediated experience for children of this age is counterproductive. And believe it or not, and I'm sure most parents can relate, although maybe it changes with increased and heightened exposure. But whenever our kids watch a show or a program, they're usually really grumpy afterwards.
mm,
We find that they take, some time to readjust to not being in front of a screen. So it's often more work for us to kind of say, all right, you go sit down for an hour, have the screen be your babysitter, knowing that we will have to kind of handhold and be really kind of gentle and present with them to reintegrate them afterwards. So that's just been our approach, and we're not opposed to screens in certain circumstances, but we certainly lean towards avoiding them.
it seems like when you go with intention, it's like that the circle thing. You're like, okay, is it a chance to learn the language? Is it a chance for them to, or is it a distraction? That, like all of that stuff. That's when you guys have decided when is tech really needed? When is the screen time really needed? I really like
Right.
that. So, well, I feel like there's so much we did not get to discuss. Hopefully you can come back. Um,
Anytime. And
I
my
love
wife
it.
Chanel would love to join you as well one of
Oh,
these
I would
days.
love that, especially from a therapist point of view and stuff, because I love it that you guys are actually doing it. So I can be like, I knew it. I knew it was just an excuse. You guys are just being like, or people are just scared of change. I think that's the other thing. Or there's so many things that we had talked about that we didn't get to touch on in via email, and just the logistics of it, like visas and all sorts of stuff. I'm sure people would be interested. It's I'm sure talked about and will be talked about in Go Unpacked. So it's going to be in the show notes. But thank you, Elias. And yeah, is there anything that we didn't really get to touch on this session that you would like to share?
I would briefly add that part of our Go Unpacked philosophy puts travel at the center of navigating major life transitions and building capacity. We believe strongly that travel, if undertaken in the right way, can be an incredible vehicle, even a shortcut towards finding direction and finding clarity and kind of uncovering aspects of yourself that have been dormant for a long time. And then using the information you learn about yourself and your family through traveling to build the life that fits, right? to create a lifestyle based on the data that you've gathered about yourself that aligns with your personal values and what matters most. So that is at the heart of what our newsletter is about, using travel as a way to navigate life transitions and to build capacity.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. And yes, thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.